The golden light of a setting sun cast long shadows across the dusty main street of Red Cloud, Nebraska, as Pauline Hadley clutched her wedding ring between trembling fingers. 5 months a widow, and here she stood outside Gideon's pawn shop, swallowing what remained of her pride. The small gold band with its modest diamond, Samuel's promise of forever, was the last thing she owned of any value. But what good was sentiment when her daughter lay burning with fever back home? The year was 1878, and the drought had taken nearly everything else. First Samuel to pneumonia in the bitter winter, then the crops to the unrelenting summer heat. All that remained was little Emma, 5 years old and fighting for every breath as typhoid ravaged her tiny body. And Pauline couldn't lose her too, not her only child. Not the last piece of Samuel she had left in this world. "Evening, Mrs. Hadley," said Gideon Moore, the wiry pawnbroker, as the bell above his door announced her entrance. His spectacles reflected the lamplight as his eyes fixed immediately on what she held. "What brings you in so late?" "I need medicine for Emma," Pauline said, her voice steadier than she'd expected. "Dr. Fletcher says she needs quinine and laudanum. I have nothing else to trade." Gideon's face softened with genuine sympathy, but his business sense remained intact. "That ring won't fetch much, Mrs. Hadley. Times being what they are. It's all I have," she whispered, laying the band on the counter. The small diamond caught the light one last time, like Samuel winking goodbye. From the shadowed corner of the shop, a tall figure shifted. Pauline hadn't noticed him when she entered, too focused on her mission. He stepped forward now, spurs jingling softly against the wooden floorboards. Dust covered his denim pants and the dark leather vest over his cotton shirt. A stranger, with eyes the color of a summer sky and a face weathered by sun and wind. "How much for the medicine?" His voice was deep, carrying the subtle drawl of Texas. Gideon straightened. "Mr. Keller here is passing through, brought in some fine knives to sell earlier." The cowboy Keller tipped his hat slightly toward Pauline but addressed the pawnbroker. "The medicine, how much would cover it?" $8 for both," Gideon replied. "That ring might bring 3, maybe 4 if I'm generous." Without hesitation, the stranger placed coins on the counter. "Get the lady her medicine, full bottles." Pauline stared, heat rising to her face. "Sir, I cannot accept charity. I won't be indebted. It's not charity, madam." His eyes held her steadily. "Consider it an advance. I'm looking for work, and word in town is your farm needs tending. If you'll have me, I'll work it off. My farm is dying, sir. I can't pay wages. Room and board will do for now." He extended his hand. "Wade Keller." Pauline hesitated, then took his hand. "Pauline Hadley, but my daughter needs more than medicine. She needs constant care, and I can't work the fields and tend to her both." "Then it seems we might help each other." Wade nodded to Gideon, who reluctantly pushed the ring back toward Pauline before disappearing into the back room for the medicine. "Why would you help a stranger?" Pauline asked, her fingers closing around the ring. Wade's eyes drifted to the window, to the darkening sky beyond. "Because there was once a time when no one helped me, Mrs. Hadley. I don't aim to be that person to someone else." The pawnbroker returned with 2 bottles. "Quinine and laudanum. Use them sparingly." Wade collected the medicine and offered his arm to Pauline. "Your daughter's waiting." As they stepped into the twilight street, Pauline felt the weight of the medicine bottles in her basket, the familiar pressure of her wedding ring back on her finger, and the unfamiliar presence of a stranger who'd extended kindness when she least expected it and most needed it. The Hadley farm lay a mile outside town, a modest homestead that had once thrived under Samuel's care. Now the fields lay parched and neglected, the barn leaning precariously, the house itself in need of repair. But it was home, the only one Emma had ever known. Wade insisted on carrying the lantern as they approached the small farmhouse. Mrs. Belmont, the neighbor who had agreed to watch Emma, met them at the door, her lined face creased with worry. "She's been calling for you," the elderly woman said. "Fever's no better." "I have medicine now," Pauline said, already moving toward the small bedroom where her daughter lay. Emma's skin burned beneath her touch. Golden curls darkened with sweat against her pillow. Her breath came in shallow gasps, her small chest rising and falling rapidly beneath the thin cotton nightgown. "Mama's here," Pauline whispered, measuring the quinine carefully before lifting Emma's head to help her drink. The child whimpered but swallowed obediently. Wade remained in the doorway, hat in hands, watching the tender scene with a solemn expression. Mrs. Belmont eyed him suspiciously. "This is Mr. Keller," Pauline explained. "He'll be helping with the farm." The elderly woman's eyebrows rose, but she said nothing, gathering her shawl around her shoulders. "I'll be back tomorrow to check on the little one. Send word if you need me sooner." After she left, Wade cleared his throat. "I can sleep in the barn tonight. Come morning, I'll see what needs doing first." Pauline nodded, not looking away from Emma. "There's a cot in the corner of the barn. It's not much, but it's clean. More than I've had many nights." He turned to leave, then paused. "She'll be all right, Mrs. Hadley. Children are stronger than they look." For the first time since Samuel's death, Pauline felt a flicker of hope. "Thank you, Mr. Keller. Wade," he corrected gently. "Just Wade." Throughout the long night, Pauline tended to Emma, wiping her brow with cool cloths, administering small doses of laudanum when the pain seemed worst. By dawn, the child's fever had broken slightly, her breathing less labored as she finally fell into a peaceful sleep. Exhausted, Pauline stepped onto the porch just as the sun crested the horizon, painting the withered fields in deceptively golden light. To her surprise, Wade was already up, carrying water from the well to the horse trough. He straightened when he saw her, wiping his hands on his denims. "How is she?" "Better, I think. The fever's down a little." Pauline pushed a strand of copper hair behind her ear, suddenly aware of how disheveled she must look after the sleepless night. Wade nodded, his expression revealing relief. "Good, that's good news." An awkward silence fell between them, strangers thrust together by circumstance, neither quite knowing where the boundaries lay. "I should check the south field," Wade finally said. "Saw some irrigation problems when we walked in last night. The tools are in the barn. Whatever was Samuel's, my late husband's, you're welcome to use." Wade tipped his hat and headed for the barn, leaving Pauline to return to Emma's side. The child slept deeply now, her breathing steadier, her skin cooler to the touch. Pauline sank into the chair beside the bed, allowing herself a moment of gratitude mixed with uncertainty about the tall stranger working outside. By midday, the smell of coffee drew Pauline to the kitchen. Wade had started a pot on the stove and was slicing bread from a loaf he must have brought from town. "Hope you don't mind," he said, looking almost boyish in his uncertainty. "Thought you might need something to eat." That was thoughtful. Pauline accepted the mug he offered, the warmth seeping into her tired hands. "Have you worked farms before?" Wade nodded, leaning against the counter. "Grew up on one in Texas. Worked others since then. Your irrigation ditches need clearing, and the south fence has about 20 posts that need replacing. But the soil's good under all that dry top layer." Pauline sipped her coffee, studying him over the rim of her mug. In the daylight, she could see he was younger than she'd first thought, perhaps 30 to her 25, with lines around his eyes that spoke of years in the sun rather than age. "Why Red Cloud?" she asked. "There are bigger towns, better opportunities." A shadow passed over his face. "I go where the work takes me. Been drifting since the war. The war's been over 13 years. Not for everyone. His tone closed the subject as effectively as a slammed door. Pauline nodded, respecting his privacy. I should check on Emma. She was awake earlier, Wade said. Asked for water. I gave her some, hoped that was all right. Of course. Pauline felt a rush of gratitude that he'd looked in on her daughter. Thank you. When she entered Emma's room, the child was indeed awake, propped against her pillows. Mama, who's the man? Emma asked, her voice weak but curious. His name is Wade. He's going to help us with the farm for a while. Pauline sat beside her, checking her forehead, still warm but no longer burning. He has a nice smile, Emma said seriously. Like Papa's. Pauline's heart clenched. Does he now? Well, he's being very kind to help us. He said he'd fix my doll's arm. See? Emma pointed to her rag doll, which had indeed been mended with neat stitches where the arm had been coming loose. That was thoughtful of him. Pauline stroked her daughter's hair, wondering what manner of man this wandering cowboy truly was. Hard-edged enough to survive years of drifting, yet gentle enough to mend a child's toy. The days fell into a rhythm. Wade worked from sunrise to sunset, repairing fences, clearing irrigation ditches, coaxing life back into the neglected fields. Pauline tended to Emma, who improved steadily but remained weak, and managed the household. They shared quiet meals, conversation gradually becoming easier between them. On the 7th day, a fierce storm blew in from the west. Wade worked frantically to secure what he could before the deluge hit, then rushed to help Pauline close shutters and move Emma's bed away from the leaking window. Roof's going to need patching when this passes, he shouted over a thunderclap that made Emma whimper and bury her face in Pauline's skirts. It always leaks in the same spot, Pauline replied, her arms around her daughter. Samuel meant to fix it last fall, but then he got sick. Wade's expression softened. I'll take care of it, don't worry. The storm raged through the night. Emma, frightened by the thunder, finally fell asleep in Pauline's bed. Wade insisted on staying up, moving buckets to catch the worst leaks, stoking the fire to ward off the sudden chill. Near dawn, Pauline found him slumped in a chair by the hearth, fast asleep, his face peaceful in repose. She stood watching him for a long moment, surprised by the warmth that spread through her chest. Gently, she draped a blanket over his shoulders, her fingers lingering a second longer than necessary. His hand caught hers as she withdrew, his eyes opening, alert despite his exhaustion. Everything all right? Yes, she whispered, suddenly aware of how close they stood, how alone they were in the quiet dawn. Just thought you might be cold. He released her hand, but his gaze held hers. Thank you. Pauline stepped back, flustered by her own reaction to his touch. I should check on Emma. After the storm, the air carried the promise of renewal. The parched earth had drunk deeply, and green shoots appeared where before there had been only dust. Wade worked with renewed vigor, and Pauline found herself watching him from the kitchen window more often than she'd care to admit. Emma grew stronger daily, soon well enough to sit on the porch and watch Wade work, chattering to him whenever he came close enough to hear. To Pauline's surprise, he always made time to answer the child's endless questions, his patience seemingly limitless. 2 weeks after Wade's arrival, Dr. Fletcher paid a visit to check on Emma. The gruff physician pronounced her recovering well but prescribed continued rest and good nutrition. You're looking better yourself, Pauline, he commented as they stepped outside. Less desperate, Pauline smiled faintly. Things are improving, Doctor. Fletcher's eyes followed Wade as he worked in the nearby field. So I see. Town's talking, you know, her smile faded. Let them talk. Mr. Keller has been nothing but respectful and hardworking. I'm sure he has, the doctor replied neutrally. Just be careful, a widow alone. People assume the worst. After he left, Pauline stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself despite the warmth of the day. Wade approached, wiping sweat from his brow. "Everything all right with Emma?" "Yes, she's doing well." Pauline hesitated, then added, "Doctor Fletcher says the town is gossiping about us." Wade's expression hardened slightly. "Does that bother you? I've lived in Red Cloud my whole life. These people brought casseroles when Samuel died, prayed for Emma when she fell ill. Their opinions matter." "And what is their opinion exactly?" Pauline met his eyes. "That it's improper for a young widow to have a single man living on her property, that there must be more to our arrangement." Wade was silent for a long moment. "I can find other accommodations in town if it would protect your reputation." "No," Pauline said quickly, too quickly. "That is, the farm needs you. Emma's grown fond of you and the work you've done. I couldn't pay anyone to care as much." His expression softened. "Then let them talk, we know the truth." But as Wade returned to his work, Pauline wondered what the truth really was. That she'd begun to look forward to their quiet evenings together. That her heart quickened when their hands accidentally touched. That sometimes she caught him looking at her with an expression that made her wonder if he felt it too. The next morning, Wade was gone before sunrise, leaving only a note saying he had business in town. He returned mid-afternoon with a wagon loaded with lumber, seed packets, and supplies. "What's all this?" Pauline asked, stepping into the yard as he began unloading. "Thought we could start a vegetable garden for Emma. Doctor said she needs good food." Wade nodded toward the seed packets. "And the lumber's for repairs. Roof first, then the barn." Pauline picked up one of the packets, carrots, running her thumb over the colorful illustration. "How did you pay for these things?" Wade hesitated. "Had some savings." "Mr. Keller," she said firmly, "I appreciate your help more than I can say, but I won't have you spending your money on my farm." "Our agreement was room and board for work," he countered. "I'm just doing my part. This is far beyond Pauline." It was the first time he'd used her given name, and it stopped her protest cold. "Let me do this." Something in his eyes, a plea, a need to be useful that went beyond their arrangement, made her nod reluctantly. "All right, but I'll find a way to repay you eventually." "No need." He resumed unloading, the matter settled in his mind. Emma was delighted with the prospect of a garden, insisting on helping plant the seeds despite her lingering weakness. Wade fashioned her a small rake sized for her hands, and Pauline watched from the kitchen window as he patiently showed her daughter how to prepare the soil, how deep to place each seed, how to water gently. The sight stirred something in her chest, a longing she'd thought buried with Samuel. Emma needed a father, and Pauline was beginning to realize she might need someone too. That evening, after Emma was asleep, Pauline joined Wade on the porch. He was whittling, his hands moving with practiced precision over a small piece of wood. "Thank you," she said quietly, "for being so good with Emma today." Wade smiled, not looking up from his work. "She's a good kid, smart like her mother. She's never known any home but this one." Pauline gazed out at the darkened fields. "After Samuel died, I thought I'd have to sell. Move to town, find work as a seamstress or laundress. Emma would have hated it. And now I think we might actually make it." She turned to face him. "Because of you." Wade set aside his whittling. "You would have found a way. You're stronger than you know. Perhaps. But I'm glad I didn't have to find out." Pauline hesitated, then asked the question that had been on her mind for weeks. "Why did you really help me that day in the pawn shop? The truth." Wade was silent for so long she thought he might not answer. Finally, he sighed, leaning forward to rest his elbows on his knees. "I had a sister once, Mary. She married young, had a baby. Her husband died in the war. She got sick after, tried to sell her wedding ring for medicine." His voice grew rough. "No one helped her. By the time I got her telegram, it was too late. For both of them. Pauline's hand found his in the darkness. "I'm so sorry. When I saw you in that shop holding that ring." He shook his head, couldn't walk away, not again. His honesty touched her deeply. Impulsively, she leaned over and pressed a kiss to his cheek. "Thank you for telling me." Wade turned his head slightly, their faces suddenly close in the darkness. For a heartbeat, Pauline thought he might kiss her properly. Instead, he squeezed her hand gently before releasing it. "Better get some rest," he said, his voice slightly hoarse. "Tomorrow's planting day." Pauline nodded, rising from her seat, strangely disappointed yet relieved. Whatever was growing between them needed time like the seeds they would plant tomorrow. Neither of them was ready to rush it. The weeks passed, and summer bloomed fully across the Nebraska prairie. Under Wade's care, the farm began to thrive again. The vegetable garden yielded its first tender shoots, the repaired irrigation channels brought life to the fields, and the barn stood straight once more. Emma regained her strength, racing around the yard with the energy only a 5-year-old possessed, often trailing after Wade, asking endless questions that he answered with remarkable patience. In the evenings, he taught her to whittle simple shapes, much to Pauline's initial concern and eventual amusement when her daughter proudly presented her with a somewhat lopsided but recognizable wooden horse. One particularly hot afternoon, Wade rode into town to purchase supplies. He returned with not only the needed items but also a letter for Pauline. "Postmaster said it came last week," he explained, handing her the envelope. Pauline recognized her sister's handwriting immediately. Catherine lived in Chicago with her merchant husband and wrote infrequently. Pauline opened the letter, scanning its contents quickly, her expression growing troubled. "Bad news?" Wade asked, unpacking the supplies. "Catherine wants me to come to Chicago, says she can find me suitable work and proper schooling for Emma." Pauline refolded the letter, her movements precise. "She never approved of Samuel or farm life. She's been trying to get me to move to the city since he died." "Is that something you'd consider?" Wade's tone was carefully neutral. Pauline looked around the kitchen at the home she and Samuel had built together, now being reborn under Wade's care and her own determination. "No, this is our home, Emma's and mine, but Catherine means well. And sometimes I wonder if Emma wouldn't be better off with more opportunities, more security than I can provide here." Wade set down the bag of flour he was holding. "Seems to me, Emma's got everything she needs right here. Love, fresh air, room to grow. City's no place for a child who lights up at the sight of new seedlings." Pauline smiled despite herself. "You sound like Samuel. He always said cities make people forget what matters. Smart man." "He would have liked you," she said softly, surprising herself with the realization that it was true. Samuel had valued honesty and hard work above all else, qualities Wade possessed in abundance. That evening, when Emma was asleep, Pauline found Wade on the porch again, smoking a rare cigarette as he gazed at the stars. "I've decided to write Catherine tomorrow," she said, settling beside him, thanking her for her offer but declining. Wade nodded, a small smile playing at the corner of his mouth. "Good. The farm is coming back to life. I want to see it through, see what we can make of it." His eyes met hers at the word "we," but he said nothing, just offered her his hand. Pauline took it, and they sat in comfortable silence, watching as lightning bugs began to flicker in the gathering darkness. "Never thought I'd stay in one place this long," Wade said eventually. "Nearly 2 months now. And how do you find it, staying put?" He considered the question seriously. "Peaceful, seeing the results of your work day by day instead of riding away once the job is done." "You could keep seeing it," Pauline said quietly. "There's always work to be done here." Wade turned to face her. "Are you asking me to stay, Pauline?" "Yes," she admitted. For the farm, for Emma. She drew a deep breath. For me. He reached out, his calloused fingers gently brushing a strand of hair from her face. I was hoping you would. This time, when he leaned toward her, neither of them pulled away. His lips found hers, gentle at first, then with a hunger that matched her own. Pauline's hand slid up to his shoulders as she leaned into the kiss, her heart pounding with emotions she'd thought long buried. When they finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Wade rested his forehead against hers. I've been wanting to do that for weeks. What took you so long? She whispered. Wasn't sure you were ready after Samuel. Pauline touched his cheek. I'll always love him. He was my first love, Emma's father, but my heart didn't die with him. Wade's arms tightened around her. I'm not looking to replace him. Just hoping to build something new alongside his memory. I think that's exactly what he would have wanted for us. Pauline laid her head against Wade's chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart. For me to be happy again. They stayed on the porch late into the night, talking of the future of fall harvests and winter preparations, of Emma's schooling and Wade's plans for expanding the farm come spring. When Pauline finally rose to go inside, Wade caught her hand. I meant what I said about building something. Together, if you'll have me. Pauline smiled, her heart fuller than it had been in a very long time. I believe we already have. News traveled fast in Red Cloud. Within days, it seemed the entire town knew that Wade Keller had become more than just a hired hand at the Hadley farm. Reactions were mixed. Some, like Mrs. Belmont and Dr. Fletcher, expressed quiet approval. Others whispered behind fans at church about the impropriety of a widow moving on so quickly. Pauline held her head high. Let them talk, she told Wade after a particularly pointed sermon about propriety from the young pastor. We have nothing to be ashamed of. Wade squeezed her hand as they walked home from church, Emma skipping ahead of them. Still, might be time to make things more official. For Emma's sake and yours. Pauline's heart skipped. Mr. Keller, are you proposing something? Not yet. His eyes twinkled. When I do, you'll know it, just thinking out loud. The following week brought an unexpected visitor. Pauline was hanging laundry while Emma helped by tangling the sheets when a smart buggy pulled up in the yard. A well-dressed woman stepped down, surveying the farm with obvious disdain. Catherine, Pauline hurried forward, surprised and somewhat dismayed to see her sister. I decided your letter wasn't sufficient, Catherine said, embracing Pauline stiffly. I needed to see for myself what could possibly make you choose to remain in this wilderness. Emma ran to her aunt, receiving a more genuine hug. Aunt Catherine, did you bring me a present? Emma. Pauline scolded, but Catherine laughed. Of course I did, darling. It's in my trunk. Perhaps your mother will help me bring it in while we discuss some important matters. Once inside, Catherine wasted no time. You didn't mention in your letter that you had taken a companion. Wade is. Pauline hesitated, uncertain how to define what they were to each other. I've heard all about Mr. Keller from that chatty shopkeeper in town, Catherine continued. A drifter with no family, no connections, no prospects beyond this failing farm. She took Pauline's hands. You can do better, sister. There are respectable widowers in Chicago, men with means to provide for you and Emma properly. Wade provides for us just fine, Pauline replied, pulling her hands away. And this farm is far from failing now. Catherine looked around the modest kitchen. This isn't the life our parents wanted for you. A hardscrabble existence with a man who'll likely move on once winter comes. You don't know him, Pauline's voice hardened. And I'm not looking for a replacement provider. I'm building a life with someone she stopped, realizing what she'd been about to say. Catherine's eyebrows rose. Someone you love. After just 2 months. Pauline, be sensible. Before Pauline could respond, the door opened and Wade entered, dusty from the fields. He stopped short at the sight of Catherine. "Wade, this is my sister, Catherine Morgan, from Chicago." Pauline's tone conveyed volumes. Wade removed his hat. "Madam, welcome to our home." The hour wasn't lost on Catherine, whose lips thinned. "Mr. Keller, I was just discussing with my sister the opportunities awaiting her in Chicago." "Were you now?" Wade's expression remained pleasant, but Pauline saw the tension in his shoulders. "And what did she tell you?" "That she's determined to stay in this God-forsaken place," Catherine said bluntly. "Though I cannot fathom why." Wade's eyes met Pauline's across the room. "Perhaps because she's built something worth keeping here, something that matters. A dilapidated farm and whatever arrangement you two have, that's what matters more than her daughter's future." "Emma's future is secure," Pauline interjected firmly. "She'll grow up knowing the value of hard work, of land that responds to care, of community." "And love," Wade added quietly. "She'll grow up with love." Something in his tone made Catherine look between them more carefully. After a moment, her expression softened slightly. "You really do care for my sister?" "More than I can say," Wade answered honestly. Catherine sighed. "Well, I still think you're both being foolish. But I suppose I should stay a few days, see this miraculous transformation for myself." Catherine's visit lasted a week, longer than Pauline had feared but shorter than she'd hoped. By the end, even Catherine had to admit that the farm was flourishing under their combined care, and that Emma was thriving in the country environment. Most surprisingly, she and Wade developed an unlikely rapport, bonding over a shared love of chess that Pauline hadn't known either possessed. On her final evening, Catherine joined Pauline on the porch while Wade put Emma to bed, the child having insisted on a story from her new favorite person. "He's good with her," Catherine acknowledged, "and with the land, and I suspect with you." Pauline smiled. "Yes to all three. I still think life would be easier in Chicago. Easier isn't always better." Pauline took her sister's hand. "I'm happy, Catherine, truly happy." Catherine squeezed her hand. "Then I suppose I can stop worrying quite so much, though I do expect you both to visit. Emma should see something of the world beyond Nebraska." "We will," Pauline promised, touched by her sister's acceptance. After Catherine's departure, life settled back into its rhythm, but with subtle changes. Wade moved from the barn to the small bedroom off the kitchen, a compromise between propriety and their growing closeness. They worked side by side during the days, shared quiet evenings after Emma was asleep, and slowly built the foundation of a future together. Harvest time brought the first tangible rewards of their labor. The fields yielded enough to sell the surplus in town, providing much-needed cash for winter supplies. Emma's garden produced an abundance of vegetables that Pauline preserved in jars lining the cellar shelves. For the first time since Samuel's death, Pauline faced winter without dread. On a crisp October evening, Wade suggested a ride to watch the sunset from the ridge overlooking the farm. Emma was having dinner with Mrs. Belmont, who had become a surrogate grandmother to the child. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Wade said as they sat on a blanket, the land spread before them painted in gold and crimson by the setting sun. "It is." Pauline leaned against his shoulder, content. Wade seemed uncharacteristically nervous, fidgeting with something in his pocket. Finally, he took a deep breath. "Pauline, when I came to Red Cloud, I wasn't looking for anything permanent. Just passing through like always. Then I saw you in that pawn shop, holding your ring, and something changed." Pauline sat up straight, her heart suddenly racing. "These past months have been the happiest of my life," Wade continued. "Being with you and Emma, working this land, building something lasting." He pulled a small box from his pocket, opening it to reveal a delicate gold ring with a small pearl. "I'm not asking you to replace what you had with Samuel, but I'm hoping you might consider building a new chapter with me." Tears filled Pauline's eyes. "Wade, I know it hasn't been that long. If you need time, yes," she interrupted. "My answer is yes." Relief and joy flooded his face as he slipped the ring onto her finger next to Samuel's band, which she still wore. "I wasn't sure about the ring, if you'd want to wear too." Pauline looked down at her hand at Samuel's ring, a testament to her past and Wade's, a promise for her future. "This is perfect. One for the love I lost, one for the love I found." Wade cupped her face in his hands, kissing her with a tenderness that made her heart ache. "I love you, Pauline Hadley. And I love you, Wade Keller." The words, finally spoken aloud, felt like coming home. They married in November, a small ceremony in the Red Cloud Church with Emma as their flower girl, beaming with pride. Catherine returned for the wedding, bringing gifts and a grudging admission that perhaps Nebraska wasn't quite the wilderness she'd imagined. Winter came, harsh as always on the prairie, but the farmhouse was warm with newly repaired walls and a sturdy roof. The cellar was stocked with preserved food, the barn filled with hay, and for the first time in years, Pauline didn't count every penny with desperation. More importantly, the house was filled with laughter, Emma's childish giggles, Wade's deep chuckle, Pauline's own joy bubbling over at unexpected moments. In the evenings, they would sit by the fire, Wade whittling or reading, Pauline sewing or writing letters, Emma playing with the elaborate dollhouse Wade had crafted for her Christmas gift. Sometimes Pauline would catch Wade watching her with an expression of wonder, as if he couldn't quite believe his good fortune. "What?" she asked one such evening, setting aside her mending. "Just thinking about that day in the pawn shop," he replied. "How close I came to not walking in when I did." "But you did walk in," Pauline reminded him, "and everything changed." Wade nodded, reaching for her hand. "Best decision I ever made." When spring returned to the prairie, it brought new beginnings in more ways than one. The fields greened early, promising a bountiful year ahead. Emma started school in town, riding proudly with Wade each morning on his horse, and Pauline discovered she was expecting a child. She told Wade on a warm April evening as they walked the perimeter of the farm, inspecting the new growth. "A baby." His voice was hushed with awe. "You're sure, Doctor?" "Fletcher confirmed it yesterday. Due in November around our anniversary." Wade lifted her off her feet, spinning her in a circle before setting her down gently, suddenly concerned. "Should I not have done that? I don't want to hurt you or the baby." Pauline laughed, her hands on his chest. "I'm with child, not made of glass, but I appreciate the concern." He knelt before her, pressing his ear to her still flat stomach. "Hello in there, little one. Your pa can't wait to meet you." Tears pricked Pauline's eyes at the tenderness of the gesture. Wade looked up, catching sight of her emotion. "Happy tears, I hope, the happiest." She pulled him to his feet. "I never thought I'd have this again, a complete family." "We'll need a bigger house," Wade said practically. "I've been thinking about adding a couple of rooms off the back. A proper bedroom for Emma, a nursery for this little one." "Always planning ahead," Pauline teased. "The baby won't need its own room for at least a year. Better to be prepared." Wade rested his hand on her stomach. "Besides, this might not be the last one." The summer passed in a blur of activity. Wade expanded the house as promised, with help from neighbors who had finally fully accepted him into the community. Emma finished her first year of school with high marks and endless enthusiasm for learning. And Pauline's belly grew round with new life, a visible symbol of the second chance they'd all been given. In late October, just as the harvest was concluding, Pauline went into labor. The birth was long but uncomplicated, and as dawn broke on the first day of November, William Samuel Keller announced his arrival with lusty cries that brought tears to his father's eyes. "He's perfect," Wade whispered, cradling his son with reverent hands. "Absolutely perfect." "He has your eyes," Pauline observed tiredly from the bed, "and I think he'll have your stubborn chin." Emma, allowed in to meet her brother after the midwife had cleaned everything, approached the bed cautiously. "He's so small." "You were that small once," Pauline told her, patting the bed beside her. "Would you like to hold him?" Under Wade's careful supervision, Emma held her baby brother, her expression solemn with the responsibility. "I'm going to teach him everything, how to read and ride and plant seeds." "I'm sure you will," Wade said, his hand resting on her shoulder. "You'll be the best big sister anyone could ask for." That evening, when Emma was asleep and the baby rested in the cradle beside their bed, Wade sat beside Pauline, his expression thoughtful. "What are you thinking about?" she asked, tired but content. "About rings," he said, taking her left hand where both bands still gleamed. "About how sometimes the things we think we have to give up come back to us in unexpected ways." Pauline understood immediately. "Samuel's ring, the medicine." Wade nodded. "If you hadn't gone to sell that ring that night, if you hadn't been there to give it back, along with the medicine," he completed, "it was like a circle closing and another beginning." Pauline looked down at their sleeping son, at the new life they had created together. A perfect circle. Outside, the first snow of winter began to fall, dusting the prosperous farm in white. Inside, the fire crackled warmly, illuminating the family that had found each other against all odds, a widow who'd nearly lost everything, a drifter who'd found his home, a child who'd gained a father, and a baby born of new beginnings. "I love you," Wade whispered, pressing a kiss to Pauline's temple. "More than I ever thought possible." "And I love you," she replied, leaning into his strength, "for giving me back my ring, my daughter's health, and my heart." As William stirred in his cradle, tiny fists waving in the firelight, Wade and Pauline exchanged a smile filled with all the promise of the life they were building, a life born from a chance encounter in a pawn shop, where a desperate act had led to an unexpected gift, and a cowboy had given a widow back far more than she'd almost lost. 5 years later, the Keller farm was nearly unrecognizable from the struggling homestead Pauline had nearly lost. Fields stretched in neat rows across land that had been purchased from neighboring properties. A new barn stood tall beside the original, and the expanded farmhouse glowed with lamplight against the gathering dusk. On the wide front porch, Pauline sat in a rocking chair, her rounded belly evidence of their third child due in the spring. Beside her, Wade whittled a small wooden horse, adding to the collection he'd made for their children. From the yard came the sound of laughter as Emma, now 10, chased 4-year-old William around a towering oak tree that Wade had planted the spring after their marriage. The girl had blossomed into a confident young lady with her mother's copper hair and her biological father's gentle nature, while William was his father's son through and through, adventurous, strong-willed, and unfailingly kind. "They're getting louder by the day," Wade observed with a smile, setting aside his carving. "Just wait until this one joins them," Pauline replied, rubbing her stomach as the baby within kicked vigorously. Wade placed his hand beside hers, his expression still filled with wonder even after experiencing this twice before. "Another Keller with strong opinions. Like father, like child," Pauline teased, covering his hand with her own. As twilight deepened, Emma led William up the porch steps, both children dusty and happy from their play. "Pa, can we have a story before bed?" William asked, climbing into Wade's lap without waiting for permission. "Of course, but after you wash up," Wade answered, ruffling the boy's dark hair. Both of you look like you've been rolling in the fields all day." "We were building a fort," Emma explained seriously, "for when the baby comes. Every child needs a fort." Pauline exchanged an amused glance with Wade. "Very thoughtful. Now listen to your father and wash up." As the children disappeared into the house, Wade moved to stand behind Pauline's chair, his hands resting on her shoulders. "Happy?" he asked, a ritual question between them. "Completely," she answered, tilting her head back to smile up at him. "You more than I deserve." He leaned down to kiss her softly. "Sometimes I still can't believe this is my life." Pauline understood. There were moments when she too marveled at the journey that had brought them here from the desperate widow prepared to sell her last treasure to the contented wife and mother she had become. From the drifter with nowhere to call home to the respected farmer and devoted father Wade now was. "Come sit with me a while longer," she said, gesturing to the chair beside her. "The children will be arguing over the wash basin for at least 10 minutes. Wade settled beside her, reaching for her hand automatically. The gold of their wedding bands caught the last light of day. Wade's plain band beside Pauline's 2 rings, Samuel's and Wade's, worn together as they had been since their wedding day. "I received a letter from Catherine today," Pauline said. "She's coming for a visit next month. Says she can't wait until after the baby is born." Wade chuckled. "She just wants to bring more of those ridiculous fancy toys that the children love and we can never replicate." "Probably," Pauline agreed with a laugh. "She mentioned bringing her new suitor this time, a professor of literature, apparently quite serious." "About time," Wade said. "She deserves someone who appreciates her sharp mind." They sat in comfortable silence as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. From inside came the sounds of children's laughter, of home and family and belonging. "I still have it, you know," Wade said suddenly. "Have what?" "The medicine bottles. From that first night, I kept them." Pauline turned to him in surprise. "Whatever for?" Wade's expression was thoughtful. "To remind me how quickly life can change. How one decision to walk into a pawn shop at exactly the right moment altered everything." "For both of us," Pauline said softly. "I was so afraid that night. For Emma, for our future. I never imagined selling my ring would lead to all of this." Wade lifted her hand to his lips, kissing it gently. "I thank God every day that I was there, that I could give you back your ring, the medicine, that somehow it led to you giving me your heart." "A fair exchange," Pauline replied, her eyes shining with love. "The best one I ever made." As night settled fully over the prosperous farm, Wade and Pauline Keller sat together on the porch of the home they had built, surrounded by the life they had created from the most desperate of beginnings. Their children's laughter echoed from within, their land stretched fertile and productive around them, and their future stretched ahead, as bright and promising as the stars now filling the Nebraska sky, all because a cowboy had once given a widow back her wedding ring, along with medicine, hope, and ultimately, love.